So I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the economy in terms of, for nonprofits and some of the big changes that I see, and I think things that they mean for our community. So I'll just kind of start in on that. I think, obviously everybody knows the economy crashed in 2008. It's crashed many times before. I think many of us have lived through other downturns. But this one was way more serious, and for a number of reasons, and one that is that it was worldwide. You very rarely find a recession that every country is dragged into. Usually some countries are doing well and some are doing badly. Number two, it really showed us how global our economy really is. So for example, the almost bankruptcy of Iceland was caused by the subprime mortgage meltdown in Southern California. Even though Iceland has very, very strict rules about how they invest, the way those debts were divided up and resold meant that they didn't realize that that's what they were buying. Number three, which is related to number two, was caused by a combination of extremely poor monetary policy, greed, I think we'd have to say, particularly on the part of the banking industry, and it was exacerbated by a regressive tax structure which has caused the United States to have the dubious distinction of having the largest gap between rich and poor of any country in the world. And there really are some competitors for that, So if we cut to the present day, the economy's actually started to grow again. In the last quarter of 2011, the Commerce Department reported that the economy grew at a rate of 3%, which was actually pretty good, and it was about twice as much as it had been growing. Personal income really jumped. That quarter, Americans earned $13 trillion, 3.3 billion more than was previously thought, okay? So that sounds really good, doesn't it? But when we kind of look at it, we realize no, because more than 1/3 of those gains went to the 15,600 super rich households in the top 0.1% of our nation, okay? 1/3 of those gains, I just want to repeat this, went to 15,000 households. I mean, that's extraordinary. In fact, in the last two recoveries, most of the gains have gone to a tiny percentage of people. 45% of Clinton's gains went to a tiny percentage, 65% of Bush-era growth, both went to the top 1%. According to the economist Emanuel Size, who's here at Berkeley, the top 1% pocketed 93% of the economic gains in 2010. In fact, 37% of the gains went to the top 0.1%, and significant probably for almost everybody in this room, no one below the richest 10% saw any gain at all. When adjusted for inflation, in fact, the bottom 90%, which again is, the vast majority of people, experienced a $4,800 drop in income from the year 2000. We are earning $4,800 less now than we were in the year 2000, if you're in that 90%, bringing the average income of the average person down to $29,800. So let's look at just what this means, because I think sometimes you're like the 37% of the 1% of the blah, 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 and you're, but this is kind of what it means. The three richest people in the world control more wealth than all 600 million people living in the world's poorest countries. For example, a baby born in El Salvador has a better chance of surviving than a baby born in Detroit. Canadians live 3 years longer on average than we do. What's that about? It's cold up there. I don't get it.
The weather.
They have health care. Yes, that would. Like Romney pointed out about Israel. Yeah. A study in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that older Americans are significantly less healthy than their British counterparts. We have more diabetes, more heart attacks, stroke, lung disease, and cancer. And even the poorest people in England can expect to live longer than the richest Americans. So this is a very interesting thing when you begin to look at this, because for decades, I think those of us who worked on issues of poverty and social justice felt that really the solution to poverty was creating an economy that allowed everyone to get ahead. And we worked for a lot of different things: fair taxes, equity in education, access to high-quality health care for everyone, and so on. And of course, these things are really important, and if you're working on them, I want you to keep doing that. But a great deal of research coming out of public health and public policy schools is asking us to shift our thinking about the central role of economic progress in creating a just society. Inequality is becoming more and more profound, but that's really only part of the story, and the most interesting part is what I want to tell you now. And I'm quoting a lot from a bunch of information that was compiled by two public health activists named Kate Pickett and Richard Wilkinson, compiled on their website, the Equality Trust, and in their book, The Spirit Level, Why Greater Equality Makes Society Stronger. So Pickett and Wilkinson looked at a number of serious social problems, and they asked, why are these problems so much worse in some developed countries than in others? So they pulled out poor countries. They said, just let's take the top 32 developed countries. So put more directly, just to kind of, how does this apply to us? Why is the United States, okay, the leader in infant mortality, homicide, prison rates, teen pregnancy, substance abuse? We are the leader by miles in all of those, okay? And the answer, and so what they did is they took all the pressing social problems and they took all and they kind of put them up one side of a graph, and then across the bottom, they put in a variety of things. So for example, you take homicide. Why does the United States have more homicide than any other country in the world? By a lot. And they said, well, is it because we have violent media? No, actually some other countries have more violent media. Is it because we have such easy access to guns? Could be a factor, but other countries also have very easy access to guns. And so they would look at all these possibilities. And what they came up with one problem after another that they looked at, is one constant variable, one constant across the bottom, and that was income inequality. That's different than poverty. You could have a country that was actually much poorer than we are, but the top person wasn't that, the distance between the top and the bottom wasn't that vast. There's something about the distance between the top and the bottom that lends itself to these very, very profound social problems. And they came to this, to me, extremely stunning conclusion that I think has to inform our work as we go forward. And they say this: economic growth, for so long the great engine of progress, has in the rich countries largely finished its work. Further improvements in the quality of life now depend on community and how we relate to each other. To truly take in that economic progress has done its work, I think really requires sitting quietly for a while. This is not a small insight, and acting on it requires a major retooling in how most of us think. What this really means is, in fact, that capitalism is kind of over. There's no point in arguing about it anymore, okay? All the good that it could do and most of the bad, it's been done. Now, capitalism is like radiation, has a long half-life, so, you know, it's still around, but it's not gonna, it's sort of losing steam, okay? And what it means, because we all look, of course, at we look at poor people, poor communities, and we try to figure those out. But what these public health people do is they think, you know, let's look. What's interesting is that rich people don't seem to be any better off either. So this is a kind of amazing change. That there is no point for a wealthy person in the United States to become wealthier. So for example, if you earn $100,000 a year, you might think, oh, I'd be happier if I earned $200,000 a year. But in fact, all the evidence is that no, you would not. You would not live longer. You would not be any less likely to be shot or to have a stroke or to become an alcoholic. You will not, nothing good will happen to you by having that extra money. And that's an amazing thing. And you would be better off if you moved to Finland, so you might want to use extra money to do that. But so a recent Christian Science Monitor report said the standard of living for Americans has fallen longer and more steeply over the past 3 years than at any time since the U.S. government began recording it 5 decades ago. The quality of life for everyone in the United States, everyone, is going down, and it will continue to do so. And for poor people, which we have more of every day, a drop in the quality of life is disastrous or sometimes even fatal. So we have to kind of take that in. Now, as a person who makes a living in the nonprofit sector, I need to think about how to address pressing social problems without relying on any of the old ideas about economic growth, even the ones that were progressive. So the question becomes, what kind of wealth will we need to create in a post-capitalist society? And how exactly will we pursue what Pickett and Wilson has said, a quality of life that depends on community and how we relate to each other? And as a fundraiser, I have to ask myself, how will this affect fundraising? And probably you were wondering, when was I ever going to get to that? So the thing is, to me, this is some of the, Alice Walker said the other day, I heard her on the radio, and she said, this is the most exciting time to be alive because so much is at stake. And I totally, totally agree with that. This is, for me in my professional life, this is the most exciting time I have been alive. I am more excited now than I have been ever in my life. And I tend to be a kind of an excited person. So, and the reason is because I think the things that we know, that we as grassroots activists know, how to take care of each other, how to share space, okay, how to do a lot with not much. That knowledge is the most important knowledge in America today, what we know. And we need to claim that and move forward. So I want to kind of look at, in terms of fundraising, just a few little what we call best practices. I actually hate that word, I admit, but and some of the assumptions we make about fundraising, and I want to kind of turn them on their head and say, if we take this insight seriously, what would we do in terms of fundraisers? So I want to just look at a few. I could look at quite a few, but I've just picked a few. False assumption number one. Okay, so this is now going to change. Whether it ever was true, I don't know, but this is has really become a false assumption. False assumption number one. We can raise the money we need for the work we do if only we have a good board, really good staff, good infrastructure, and deep dedication to best practice, and if we believe in abundance. Okay? None of that's true. You cannot raise the money you need by having a good board and good staff and believing in abundance and having best practice because there's not enough money to go around right now, because it's locked up in this top 1%. We will only raise the money we need when we have a fair and just tax structure. When we change government to be truly of, for, and by the people, and when we stop thinking that corporations are people, or that money is speech, nothing is going to change until we begin to take control of that. And when will we have that government? Some of you are wondering, okay? I don't know. But we will only have that when we have some really deep and robust conversations about what should be funded publicly and what should be funded privately. We don't have those conversations now. We just kind of let things happen, and we kind of think maybe the government should take care of that. I don't know. I'm amazed. When I'm called in to work with a client, I always start by saying, how do you think you should be funded? It wasn't about how can you get money, but how should you get money? And I'm amazed at how many of us have never thought about it. How much of our work should be funded by taxes? What aspects of our work should be funded privately? Some things should be funded by foundations, and some things should be funded by individuals, and some things should not be funded by government. But we don't stop to think, where's that line? What are the criteria? So we really have to do that. The thing is, there is enough money in the United States for us to be the country we want. But that money has to be seriously redistributed, and we have to start using that word, redistribution of wealth. We have to talk about equity, and all nonprofits, whether you get government funding or not, you have to engage in discussions about tax policy. When I was first in fundraising, which is now 35 years ago, so before some of you were born, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, when we didn't have an answering machine, can you imagine that? I started off working in domestic violence, and I worked at La Casa de las Madres, which is a domestic violence program in San Francisco. It was the very first organization in California to open an actual shelter. And was the fifth. When we opened our shelter in 1976, it was the fifth shelter to open in the United States. You can imagine now there's about 700 shelters, about 15,000 programs for domestic violence. In those days, there were 5 shelters and maybe a dozen programs. Very, very early on in that movement. In fact, we called it the battered women's movement then, okay? So when we opened our shelter, though, women would come to the shelter, and then they would leave. And where did they go? They went back. They went back to these men who beat them, and we sat around one night, I remember saying, why is this happening? And it was very clear. They did not see any economic alternative. And we didn't give them one because we didn't understand anything either. We didn't understand how to raise money. We didn't understand how to get credit in your own name. We didn't know anything, okay? And what we quickly realized, and this has been really the driver, what Nisha was talking about, how long I've been doing this work, the driver of my work has been the insight of that night that if we didn't learn everything we could about money, okay, we would wind up collaborating with the very system that the rest of our work was designed to change. And over the years, we've gotten so that we talk more easily about money. Now we have a conference like this, and we're talking more easily about money. But so now we have to apply the same lesson to taxes, which is really where most money is in the entire world, is going to be that's the largest source of money. So that's something we all have to work on, and I know some of you are not happy about that because you have enough work, but you're going to have to figure out a way to push one thing aside and do this. All right, so false assumption number 2, that's the false assumption number 1, is you can raise money just by being good at it, okay? False assumption number 2, conversation is not action. I hear people say this all the time. Well, we're just talking, let's do something, okay? But I want to say conversation is action. Conversation comes from a Latin word, conversare, which means to turn together, to turn to one another, to face one another. That's what people do when they converse. That is action. We deeply believe that all of us, well, I think everybody in this room believes that all of us have the right to an opinion, right? But the reality is no one's going to form an opinion if they don't think anyone is ever going to ask them for their opinion. And so we have a population that is by and large not engaged. Less than 50% of people who can vote actually do. About 50% of people who could volunteer, that is, they have the time, they have the skill, actually do. We're a population that mostly people that stay at home and are not engaged. And if we want people to be engaged, we have to invite them to that. And that's what we know, of course, as organizers. We need to have conversations. But really, at the end of the day, who has more conversations than people in fundraising? And keep this in mind, 7 out of 10 adults give away money. 7 out of 10 adults living in the United States give away money. More people give away money than vote. More people give away money than go to any house of worship. More people give away money than volunteer, okay? When we ask someone for money, we have their attention. That's why fundraising is organizing. When organizing, you want somebody's attention. How do you get their attention? You say, how about $50, okay? How about $100? They're like, what? Okay? So, you know, you really got to do that. But what I want you to think of, instead of thinking of the action of asking for money and measuring it against how much money you raise, I want you to also add the metric, how many people did I just have that conversation with? Because those people will be thinking and something will happen. And it may not happen in your group, and it may happen later. All right, false assumption number 3. Foundations should give more money to social justice organizations, and we, along with our allies in the foundation world, should help them and pressure them in equal measure to make more grants to our kind of work. I know organizations spend, this is a false assumption, okay? Organizations spend hours on this. They work with progressive funders, and actually there's a lot of progressive funders now. There's a lot of people who have gotten jobs in foundations, they're really good, and they really want to move the money to good stuff. We know people like that. There's some even in this room who have been program officers or are program officers right now, okay? We can all work together, that's great. But this is sort of endless convenings, endless funder convenings. And then the funders form affinity groups, and then they have convenings, okay? And then, of course, we run around trying to be invited to those convenings. And you can spend really your life going from one convening to another. And I talk to people sometimes. I talked to this woman the other day, and she said, she was a neighborhood organizer, said, I haven't been in my neighborhood in like 6 months because I'm going to these convenings, okay? But here's the thing, is I'm not opposed to those. Sometimes they're nice places, actually. But here's the thing, do the math, okay? Last year, 2011, total foundation giving was about $42 billion, okay, total foundation giving. Research shows that about 12% of that went to social justice, or about $4.4 billion. $4.4 billion is a lot of money, okay? No, not really. This is another thing we got to get used to, that's not a lot of money. Because that's less than the amount of money the top 1% saved from Bush-era tax cuts that have been extended by Obama in 1 month. the total amount of money given to all social justice by foundations in the whole United States for an entire year is less than the top 1% saved in 1 month. Even if all $42 billion, even if all the foundations had this huge born-again experience, like, oh, I got to fund social justice, even if all of it were to go to social justice, it would not turn this country around. It's not enough money. The super PAC, Restore Our Future, which is Mitt Romney's super PAC, has spent $62 billion on his campaign this year alone. So, you know what? We're not going to turn this around with money. We don't have access to the money. What we have access to is people, right? The 1% hardly has any people. Well, the top 1/10 of 1%, that's why they have to dump massive amounts of money, because there's only a few of them. There's like, really, those 15,000 families, even if they're big families, what would that be, 60,000 people? And that's hardly any people, okay, in that top 1/10 of 1%. But we have people, okay? We have 99%, 99.9% as a matter of fact. So I would say stop waiting for foundations to become something else, okay? Work with those who do good, get funded to do good work, okay? But spend most of your time where the money is, with people. All right, here's another false assumption I want you to look at. False assumption, we should keep fundraising costs low. This is a really big one that comes out a lot. We have to rethink the metrics for how much it costs to raise money. We've been told we got to keep our costs down, and people ask me all the time, how much should it cost to raise this much money? But that question leads you straight into a box canyon, okay? So let's look at it a little differently. Let's take the Restaurant Opportunity Center that Saru spoke yesterday, our keynote. She said 10 million people work in restaurants and millions more eat in restaurants, and everybody thought that was, yeah, that's right. So what if Rock could get 100,000 of those 10 million, 1%, of those workers to donate $10 each? That would be $1 million. Now, supposing that it actually costs, though, $9 to process the check, acquire the donor in the first place, send the thank you note, enter the thing in the database, have the staff that would be required to mobilize that. Cost $9 for every $10 they were able to raise. Okay, imagine that. They would still have net $100,000 and have 100,000 members. Then if they could get 10,000 people who eat in restaurants, which would not be very many, you could do that in Berkeley alone, to give $30 each, let's say, that would be $300,000. And let's say that was a really expensive crowd to get because you had to convince them. And so it costs $20 out of the $30 to process those gifts, to acquire them, process them, put the money in the bank, and so on. They would still have $100,000 in profit and 10,000 donors. But in the current accepted way of thinking, that kind of cost would be unacceptable. 90% in one case and 60% in the other. Even though, at the end of that, they would have 110,000 members and a net of $250,000. So to say nothing of the fact that those people over time would start to give more money, okay? And it would go on. So in the new way of thinking that we have to adopt, where people are central and money is a byproduct, we say that we will spend whatever we need to get people in the door, and we will spend what is required to keep them in our organization, because the people are more important than the money. So ultimately what I want to end with is this idea: if you manage to mission, money will follow. That's what you have to do. What all of us need to learn and practice in a world where economic progress is no longer the driver, and everything is about how we relate to each other and how we build community. What we need to know, we already know, as I mentioned. We know how to take care of each other, but we've kind of forgotten some of this in our efforts to brand ourselves and to be professional and to create deliverables and outcomes. Deliverables, I feel like, what are we, caterers? I'll have 55 sandwiches and an end to sexism, okay? You know. We need to stop looking at our dashboard and start looking at each other. Finally, we need to measure our lives and our organizations by how much we work for the common good. I suggest that all evaluation, all of you who do evaluation, should come down to these questions. Does the work we do help people to be happy? Does the work we do allow people to be agents of change in their own lives? Are we clear in all our work that the most important things in life are not things? Have we done everything we can to ensure that all other nonprofits working for good like us feel that we have their back, that our brand is the brand of helpfulness and cooperation, and that our story and our message is that we work for justice, we act for peace, we love mercy, and we believe that goodness will triumph? I truly, truly believe, my friends, that fundraising is about this and is integral to being able to say yes to all these questions. And I want to just end with a story from the Bible, and I was a little hesitant to do it. I don't want to offend anyone who hates the Bible, and, which I know people do. But this is just a metaphor, but it's an interesting story, and I hope some of you will really like it, and others of you will just tolerate it, because I'm a little bit of a Bible person. So, in the Christian Testament, there's a story that Jesus was, he was preaching at the Sea of Galilee, and at some point, as the day came to an end, like we are at an end here, he said to his disciples, "Why don't you go back across the sea in the boat, and I'll join you later." And so they set off. They didn't stop to think, how was he going to get there, because they had the boat. But anyway, they were ever so slightly self-absorbed, but whatever. So then they're out in the boat, and pretty soon they see Jesus walking across the water. They're like, "Oh my God," okay? And so Peter being one of the lead disciples, Peter is like he's like one of our leaders that we have, right? Like really a great person, lots of friends, little bit of a windbag, probably kind of a show-off, okay? So Peter says, "Oh, Jesus, I want to walk on water too." So Jesus goes, "Fine, come off the boat, come on out here," okay? And so Peter gets out, and then all of a sudden, the Bible says, he looked down, and he saw the waves, and he saw the wind, and he started to sink. He was like, save me, And so Jesus said to him, and all of you will know this, what did Jesus say to him? "Don't look down." Don't look down. And I think that's what we've done too much. We've been looking down at our proposals. We've been looking down at our evaluation. We've been looking down at our metrics. We've been looking down at all this kind of stuff. And we need to look out at each other. And as we move forward, we really can be the community and the country we want. And you all are going to be the leaders in that. It's been my such great pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.